Good evening, dear hearts, and welcome to the October Morganton and Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. We're happy to have you with us here tonight. Tonight, we're going to have one item of new business to discuss, and during that process, people that would like to address that topic will be invited to come to the podium and give us your name and your address during that process. But to kick things off, we'll start with old business. And our first item on that is review and approval of the September 8th meeting minutes. Now, hopefully, members of the commission, you've had an opportunity to see and read those. Do I have any recommendations of changes, modifications, et cetera? Hearing none, we'll move that those are passed. Item 2 is a review of the city council actions since our last meeting. And Wade, would you walk us through that, please?
I apologize. I did not have that in front of me.
Should have dealt with the alternate design that we have addressed with the city of Morganton concerning the substation.
Yes. The substation was approved with no one voting against. The alternative design to show landscaping around it to allow the fencing that was required by OSHA standards.
Okay. Any questions, discussion items on that item? Hearing none, we'll move on to appearances. This is a section in our meeting where we allow anyone that might be in attendance tonight that want to address an item not on our agenda, but is a concern for planning or zoning that they would like to bring to our attention as a commission. Seeing none, we're going to move right into new business. Our first item and only item is a request for approval of an alternate design for Western Piedmont Community College's Trade Center, which is currently under construction, located at 1001 Berkmont Avenue. I'm going to open that up to the public, and first I'd like to get the staff's input as far as their.
Okay. Chad, if you could pull up the presentation, please. As you know, obviously the site is along Berkmont Avenue. It is zoned HID with the corridor overlay within a portion of it. During the initial site plan review, which you can see here, although a portion of the building site was within the corridor overlay, the staff chose to use the 10% discretion to not hold them with regard to certain building features, while they were held to the standard street yard requirements. However, and as you can see here, these are the street yard requirements as shown in the ordinance. The CO performance standards would be what they were held to. Now, as you can see here, the actual site would be the southern parcel, and the entire frontage of that parcel would typically be what is required to be have the street yard applied to. Now, staff made an interpretation that only this portion of the site would be used. What you see is, in fact, the numbers that they were held to at the top and the numbers of what would have been required had that interpretation not been made. That was during their initial review, which was approved. Now they have come forward for an alternative design, which you can see here. They're showing, I believe it is clustered in 2 or 3 locations, essentially about 15 trees. And while staff has no issue with the clustering or sort of an organic layout of trees versus the straight 10-foot street yard. Staff does have issue with both an organic layout combined with the complete lack of meeting the numbers required by ordinance.
Can I stop you right there? Let's digress a second. Could we go back to the previous slide just so we could ask
Absolutely.
a few questions as we proceed? I'm a little slow here, but are the green dots that are on here indicated as plantings that would be proposed under an old or the original ordinance?
And a lot of those are existing trees.
Well, that's where
Some of them are existing. The ones closest to the building and parking area are ones that would have been tied to the actual site plan approval. Such as parking area, you can't have a parking space that's more than 60 feet from any given tree, et cetera.
So technically, or to clarify, the road that enters onto the campus.
Does have a
on the
row of
right
trees
On
that
that
goes
right
along it.
side, that row of trees is there
That exists.
and exists
yes.
now, okay. Excuse for the interruption.
But the one in question, these orange ones on the left have this figure.
That would be the typical 10-foot street yard requirement of the numbers of
That's
trees,
what-
shrubs shown in the table to the left.
So that's what's under discussion.
Yes.
Great, thank you.
Thank you for clarifying.
I was following.
Okay.
And after going over this at length, we also offered to the applicant an additional option of using the 10% option once again to reduce those numbers, at which point they chose not to use shrubs at all and bypass that option, and hence we are here now with the staff recommendation for denial.
Okay. Questions for clarification, please? Yeah, again, going back to the other plat, if you would.
Chad? Which
Yeah,
one?
that one.
Which one?
The one that
That
one
one?
right there.
Okay.
So what was proposed as an alternative is what the black listing?
Well, no, sir.
Okay.
The black is what was actually approved with the site plan that was approved last year, which they were initially functioning under. What is in red is referring to the numbers that they would have been held to had an interpretation not already been made, that instead of having the entire frontage of that southern lot count
Okay.
as ordinance would require, the interpretation was made to only look at this southern portion. I don't know if you can see my mouse here. No. But the southern portion from their entryway to the property to the south.
Which is what was in that original
Right.
slide. Okay.
So that'd be Community Drive back towards the interstate.
Correct. And so their interpretation had already given them a reduction from that standpoint. And hence, again, staff, while we have no issue with the organic placement on site as opposed to strictly going by the 10-foot deep street yard, both the organic clustering and not meeting the numbers, staff is required to recommend denial.
Anybody else like to comment, make remarks, ask questions? Hearing none, I'm truly going to open this up to the public and would ask for those that are here tonight that want to address this topic to please come forward and give us your thoughts, and it would be appreciated.
Hello, my name is Tom Gragnano. I'm with Morrisburg Architects. We are the project architects for the project. And the address of Morrisburg is 1401 West Moorhead Street in Charlotte, North Carolina. First of all, we just really want to say thank you, for the opportunity to present here today. We wouldn't be here without the, City of Morganton. We've had to cooperate for a number of years, not just on this project, but on many projects with city staff. So, we always appreciate the support. And again, we wouldn't be building a building if it wasn't for their cooperation and support. And it's a project that we're very excited about. When we started the project and we landed on this particular site at the front of campus, it was not without a lot of community engagement, engaging city council members, surrounding educators, the business community. And we landed on that site with all of that input because of wanting to have a signature building for the community that would fit well into the context of the campus. So that's why it's there. In addition, we thought it was important, too, that a little bit of history be given to the review process. We started this process not just recently with this landscape issue, but back in November of 2021. And we went through about the end of February of 2022 with staff talking about the zoning approval, the 10% reduction based on the corridor overlay. And then at that time is when the landscaping requirement came up back in January of 2021. And it was at that time with staff at that time that we had conversations about the concerns that it would present for the college and for the overall landscape. And they suggested, staff at that time suggested the alternative design and agreed that that this kind of linear approach to landscaping just wouldn't fit very well in that pastoral landscape, and suggested that we present something that would be more of clusters that fit with the landscape. So, so that was the response that we provided to the comment, and that comment that Mr. Griffin was referring to was a review comment where the staff specifically did focus more just on the one portion of the site, recognizing that this site is so large that if a building were built all the way in the back of the 300 acres, it could still affect, the remaining portion of the site. So they recognized that it would make more sense to apply it just in that area. But granted, it could have been applied to the entire area. So in our response, we said that we would apply on behalf of Western Piedmont, that you saw there, and that subsequent to that review, that the owner and the design team would proceed eventually with an application for alternative design. So, excuse me, why? So, as mentioned, the current approved plans have 18 small trees in that portion, that 600-foot portion, and 155 shrubs. And in that alternative design, we're proposing that the alternative be a more open landscape and preserve those pastoral looks, and that linear, more development look not be introduced. And ultimately, really, what the college is seeking relief from is the use of shrubs. It's the large number of shrubs, and the mulch area that would require ongoing maintenance along the road as well. They have no objection to the large trees, small trees, numbers of trees, clusters of trees, and that's what we're presenting here today. So this, again, the parcels you already saw, the lower left-hand corner was the parcel that is where Trade's building is. This is the view, of course, that, they take pride in, and you can see the vegetation there. This is the cut-through road. This is looking back from closer to School of Science and Math across the campus, and looking at some of those tree bosques that already exist with the college in the background. Now this is the view that perhaps is a little bit more pertinent in this case. This cluster of trees that you see here is an existing large cluster that's right at College Drive. And then some of the trees beyond that, like the one under the word views there, that is the last tree that is planted kind of in a formal row along College Drive. And again, just reiterating, the green dots that are in the center on the north side of the page there, that's that cluster of trees. There's, I believe it's 5 trees, large mature trees in that area. The green dots that are on the right side of College Drive that stop at the end, they actually continue all the way around close to the road. So you can see those in your view as well. So this is, if you're familiar with the building, it's going up there now, right? Taking shape. We're excited about it. And it preserves, it's on the other side of this construction fence, and of course preserves the green space there. If the plantings were planted, that 10-foot wide strip would be, oh, what happened here? Oh, okay. Yeah, that 10-foot wide strip would be just inside, would just about follow the line of the telephone poles that you see in this view. And that is looking in the other direction. So in the other direction, at the end of this view, where the word view is there are some trees there now that act as a buffer for the rental car place and for the substation, the Duke Power substation. Some of those have been dying, and part of the plan also is to replace those trees in that buffer as well. So this, this represents that plan that you saw a moment ago. So in the upper left there, far upper left, is where the substation is, where we plan to replace some of the trees there, add large mature trees and small mature trees. And then moving along the road in that grassy pasture area that was in the previous slide, plant another cluster of large and small trees. Then the next cluster of trees would be the existing one, along with those along College Drive. And although the focus is just the 600-foot frontage, the college is also willing to extend that and start to begin some of those plantings on the other side of College Drive, but again, do it with large and small trees that fit with that pastoral rolling landscape, and not introduce those low-lying shrubs and the mulch into the mix. So this is just a kind of a zoomed-in view there, making it a little easier to see the mixture of existing and new, along with the plants that would be around the building. So again, going back to this view, so this is kind of as you approach, obviously, and so this is a rendered view from the street as you come up. So in the foreground, closest to me here, there's the pine trees and some of the existing vegetation that acts as a buffer for the rent-a-car place. And then that next group of trees there is the first and new cluster of trees that would be planted. As you get further up the hill there, in the background, what you're seeing is the existing cluster of trees right at the entrance to College Drive, the trees on the other side of College Drive, and then a new cluster on a little bit further down behind Western Piedmont sign. Again, we're course, not opposed, and college is not opposed to the vegetation. And we appreciate where the staff is coming from with the number of plantings and the need to comply with the zoning ordinance. We just think that, in our opinion, that the intent is still met of trying to provide an inviting corridor for someone as they come off of I-40 and they come into the corridor, that not having that straight planting is not taking away from that beautiful view and enhancing that corridor. Those new trees and stuff will help to preserve that. So this is just a little bit further. As you get to the building, you see the building and those trees in the foreground and the background, and be able to look through and get a glimpse of the campus. And it's really not, it's not just about a single view or what the building is blocking or what we're seeing. It really is just about the overall pastoral view here and trying to preserve that overall look as opposed to trying to introduce something that we think is, out of context. And that's even from the very beginning when we reviewed this with the staff, it just didn't seem to fit. When we looked at the examples and even when staff showed us examples, a lot of the examples that are shown in the zoning ordinance here are far from what we see here. They're just a typical development of a parking lot and a building, 1 or 2 acres, where you'd plant a street yard around it without this massive landscape. So we believe that this massive landscape is much nicer than having a parking lot and a building right along the road, and that's why it still is inviting as far as the space goes. So, and this is just further back, again, seeing the vegetation there. What you're not seeing in this view is what would be the closest to you in the bottom left-hand corner would be, again, a new cluster of trees that would be planted in order to enhance those views. So, so that is the proposal, and again, we appreciate the opportunity to present. We appreciate very much the support of the staff up to this point and value their opinion, and we want to continue, of course, to work with this commission moving forward. And I think Ms. Hoyleman also has something that she'd like to contribute. So.
Good evening, and thank you for allowing us the opportunity to present the alternative landscaping design for Western Piedmont Community College. I am Sandy Holman, Vice President for Administrative Services and CFO for Western Piedmont Community College at 1001 Berkmont Avenue here in Morganton. Our President, Dr. Welch, sends his apologies for not being here as he is in Raleigh at a workforce development conference with a 2022 graduate who is receiving the Burke Outstanding Adult presented by Governor Roy Cooper this evening. So he could not be here with us, but he apologizes for that. Again, I'm going to echo some of the words that Tom had previously mentioned. We want to thank the city staff for working with us on the alternative solution. It would best meet both of our needs. We certainly respect their position, and we wished for a favorable recommendation. However, when we were informed there was no leeway on the number of plantings, especially the shrubs, even though we were recommending additional trees, we had to move forward with our original recommendation. So we are requesting consideration to allow us to eliminate the requirement of the shrubs for the street yard ordinance, not the parking lot ordinance, but just the street yard ordinance, and allow a cluster approach for the tree requirement in order to maintain the view sheds of the campus and reduce the ongoing cost and maintenance to our limited resources. As you saw from the presentation renders, Western Piedmont does believe that we substantially achieve the same intent of the purpose of the landscaping for screening and also for the street yard ordinance, which is the subject of this alternative landscape. What you're seeing here with the street yard, the intent is a transition between vehicular travelways to the built environment, and we think the trees will provide that transition. It would just be in more of a cluster approach rather than the continuous vegetation approach. So while there wouldn't be any new shrubs planted in the street yard, there would be a substantial amount of new and existing plants in the area in question. and also new shrubs around the parking lots and the building as well. Wanted to talk a little bit about how we feel like Western Piedmont is unique in this situation from traditional developments that you might see come before you. We feel that we're unique because we are a public institution encompassing over 300 acres in total. Significant portions of that are devoted to amenities in which the community uses on a regular basis. We've been in the community for over 50 years and is known as having one of the prettiest campuses in the state. I personally believe the prettiest out of the 58 community colleges, but I am biased there. Wanted to talk a little bit about some of the projects we've had where we feel like we've been strategic in planning to help preserve some of these green spaces. So looking at the campus as a whole, we have trees lining College Drive as you come in. We have trees around the pond. We have a nature trail that we maintain for the community. We have shrubs and flowers around our buildings in the green commons area where the majority of our buildings are. The site where the Regional Skilled Trades Solution Center is sited is on the front of the campus, and as Tom mentioned, that was strategic as well with a lot of input. We want this to be a signature building for Burke County, showcasing programs that our students can earn livable wages and more and stay in our community. With this signature building, we also wanted the placement of it to be viewed in different directions, coming from I-40 or coming from Morganton, in an interesting approach to where they could see what is going on and see that building and it be inviting. Another example of how we've been very strategic about this, when the North Carolina School of Science and Math wanted an entrance to their campus off of Berkmont, we did work with them on that. One provided us a secondary exit in case there was an emergency from the campus, which was important to us, but we also worked with them on designing that road or routing it through the campus to where it would not affect any trees. They wouldn't have to cut down the trees that were in the grove of trees that you may have saw on one of the renderings, kind of in that lower area. That was a grove of trees that our horticulture department planted that has many different species, and they started that over 20 years ago as an instructional program. And then again, when Duke Energy wanted a safer entrance to their facility, their substation off of College Drive versus Berkmont, because that entrance was very close to the exit of I-40 and kind of dangerous when they were trying to pull in, we worked with them as well to place that road in a position that saved a very large maturing tree that's on College Drive that we wanted to maintain and protect. So we understand the strategic nature of trying to make green space and make it the appearance aesthetically pleasing. Wanted to talk a minute about how Western Piedmont is different in another way than traditional development. We are a public institution where our funding for maintenance is from taxpayers like you and I and from all of our other residents in Burke County. And so we don't want to put extra expenses on our taxpayers more so than we have to, and we have limited resources with our maintenance department. Some of the amenities that I spoke to earlier that impact the community, not just our students, considering our 300 acres and our 30-plus building structures, our maintenance staff of 10, with only 2 dedicated to grounds, but still 10 altogether, have to maintain. But just a few of those and some examples of how the community uses those. Our nature trails, Patton High School has used that for track meets for their cross-country team. The pond is used quite frequently for community members that come and just have lunch there as a place to meet and socialize or just and gather. And also they come to fish, although I never recommend that to anyone, but each their own. We have tennis courts that the North Carolina School of Science and Math team is utilizing for practice. We have green space, front of campus, back of campus that community members walk. They bring their dogs to walk them. Very few visitors that we've had on campus have ever come in and not said how beautiful coming onto and into our campus is, how beautiful the landscape is. The college is also being part of a project for the Hunting Creek Park, which is a project that we're working on with many different agencies, the School of Science and Math, the School for the Deaf, City of Morganton, where we did receive money to relocate our emergency service training center so that we could work with a design firm that could possibly give conceptual designs for Hunting Creek Park, but the big part of that would be possibly a connection with the Greenway from Coal Chute Road through our campus to the other side of Interstate at J. Iverson Riddle. So again, we are very, very involved in keeping the green spaces and making those usable for the community. The college consistently hosts industry partners and visitors to the area on our campus as part of our economic development plan. So in summary, we are seeking this alternative design to preserve the campus views along Burkmont Avenue and obtain relief of planting the required number of shrubs just from the long-term maintenance costs. The college considers our campus to be unique to this area and an asset to the community and to visitors that are traveling to Morganton and the surrounding area. And if you'll indulge me a minute longer, I want you to visualize coming off of I-40, entering Morganton off of exit 103. So as you pass Enterprise Car Rental, you're going to see this grove of trees, and then you'll see the Skilled Trades Solution Center and what's going on there. You'll come on up about midpoint, and you'll start to see through past the building to the campus, Pfeiffer Hall and Carr Hall, with Megatronics in the background. Then as you come up to College Drive and past College Drive, you'll see those sweeping views of not only Western Piedmont's campus, the School of Science and Math, and the North Carolina School for the Deaf. It is gorgeous. It is gorgeous. So we assure you that the college staff will continually strive to make our campus aesthetically pleasing and providing an inviting appearance. We do feel like we're different from traditional development in that we have more space to maneuver and work within. We're different from our sister colleges that may sit on the road or not have as much land. For example, Catawba Valley and Hickory, they sit right on Highway 70. McDowell Community College, they're right off the interstate, but they don't really have as much land as we do, so there's not a whole lot of options. Our trustees are dedicated to maintaining our look as they have refused proposals from land developers in order to protect that image. So we're asking you to consider allowing us this exception and trusting if there is additional planning that is needed for a better appearance, that we will do that. But the required number of planting of 155 shrubs would be a burden at this point. So our alternative design of small and large trees and small groves in the cluster will complement the existing setting. So I want to thank you again for your consideration, and we'll be happy to answer any questions. We love to showcase our campus, so please feel free to visit us anytime. And if you want a tour, please give me a call. But again, thank you for your consideration. We do appreciate it.
Thank you, ma'am. Does anyone have a question for Sandy?
I've got just a point or two that I would like to ask a question on, and maybe Tom has an answer for one or something on this also. But Sandy, you mentioned the cost of this. If this college was to have to add staff to maintain that, approximately what are we talking about in cost?
If we have to add an individual onto our maintenance staff for this, you're looking at probably close to $60,000 with benefits, if not more, just because obviously there's the minimum wage, so 31.2 would be your slap minimum. But with the way that the environment is, market environment for employees now, sometimes you have to go above that as well. And then with our employer cost, you have 24.5% in retirement that we have to pay to the state, because even though they're funded with county funds, they're still considered, they still receive state benefits. So you would have the 24.5% there, the FICA, which is 7.65, and then the employer health insurance cost, which is around $7,700 a year. So we estimate about 43% of an employee's full-time salary, annual salary, that you have to add on to that.
And that would be annually.
That would be annually, and again, funding for our maintenance does come from taxpayer funds.
And that would be labor only, that would not be replacing periodically the mulch materials and
Correct.
the dead plants or something?
Or even repairs to equipment that you may use.
That's going to be a 2-year course.
It will actually be a little combination of several things. We're looking at workforce development with the skilled trades where we can offer certificates or stackable credentials to where you could build up. So if someone just wanted to come and take an electrical certificate, but then maybe afterwards, maybe 6 months or so, they decide, okay, I want more, they can come back and add on another certificate. And then at some point, as they continue to add, perhaps they get to that 2-year degree. So you can get the short-term certificates, workforce development, you can get a 2-year curriculum associate degree program.
What would be an average cost for a year for a student,
The average cost per year,
or for the course itself, 2 years? Let's say you went all the way.
I'm trying to estimate what
Roughly, it doesn't have to be close, but trying
I
to
would say
compare
just
that to
for-
putting all this money in shrubs.
I would say for tuition and fees, you're probably looking at $2,500 a year. So you could probably get through a 2-year degree program, $45,000 to $5,000. But many of our students, if they're in a curriculum program, do
You
receive
could put
financial
10
aid.
students through there for what you're gonna pay to trim the shrubs, is that correct?
Possibly, but we do have to remember that tuition goes straight to the state. We don't get to keep our tuition.
Yeah, this person wouldn't solely be responsible for trimming shrubs every day, I imagine. They would probably do other things, right?
All of our maintenance staff does jump in and help wherever needed, like especially during the summer. As I mentioned, we have 10 people. 2 are dedicated to grounds and landscaping and preserving that. But during the summer, any of the maintenance guys, whether they are normally working on plumbing or normally electrical, they may have to jump on a mower and mow because it's a lot of landscaping to take care of. And so, yes, they wear multiple hats.
Okay. Anyone else?
Well, my concern is, the future. 103 was supposed to be the first exit done when they started doing all these exits.
Yes,
Now
sir.
it looks like it's gonna be the last. You're getting a little close down there with the gas station and there's 2 sides to Berkmont. The other side in that particular early location there is older stuff that eventually will be probably modernized as they finish the road, if that ever happens.
Wade's can I get you to stop on that chain of thought? Tom, could you come back to the podium so we could ask a question? Or I've got a question to ask. In the process of your design discussion with the city staff, was the topic of the North Carolina tip for Highway 64 discussed in that process?
It was mentioned by Philip Luckadoo that it was probably pushed off to 2029, if not later.
Well, the point being is that there was a lot of discussion that took place, a lot of with the local citizens in that area, and they were going to address the widening of that road if you're going toward Lowe's on the right side. The neighborhood was in an uproar and said, why don't we do it on the left side? And so I think the consideration by the state is when they decide to do that, the left side of the road, which would be on the Western Piedmont Community College side, is going to be affected all the way out through to the power station that Duke has there. I noticed in your picture that significant line of telephone poles. And so the thought struck me that all that's going to probably be affected in the process of that by 2029. And to go through this exercise now to put stuff up there that's going to cost time for the city to have to maintain because it's in the right of way, I really have some serious thoughts as to how we should be proceeding with that.
Again, the city had no issue with the organic layout as far as bringing them away from the street. The only issue was essentially that in 227, it says, the city council may approve alternative design proposals that differ from the requirements of Article 4 of this ordinance in regards to landscaping, parking, infrastructure, or building design due to unique site circumstances or creative design proposals, provided that the intent of the ordinance is met. Now, the issue that we have is
Where do you
if you moved it to an organic layout with clustering along the site, fine, so long as you're meeting the numbers.
Okay.
But by clustering them away from the street and not meeting the numbers, we feel they are not meeting the intent of the ordinance.
Understood. Now,
And the other issue that I would like to add to that, while I'm fully sympathetic and having had taken continuing ed courses in Mecklenburg, Wake, numerous other counties. Yes, it's one of the most beautiful campuses in the state. I'll agree. However, my job is to uphold the ordinance, and by not holding them to at least meeting the intent, the issue then becomes setting precedent.
Understand?
Well, and there's some other issues too, I think, that we need to think about. And
Before you start, I'm sorry to interrupt you, Waits.
That's all right.
You're any
That was
follow-up?
one I was thinking, both sides of the street are gonna have to look the same eventually. I mean, if we leave the ordinance like it is. And those older establishments over there, they may take the hotel out, they may leave it, whatever, depend. I don't think they really decided on which one of those plans. We went through 5 plans before they did Enola Road, and I was in that because I worked in that area at that
Yeah.
time. And it took 10 years from start to finish to make that happen. It was supposed to happen in 3 years.
Yeah.
And this thing is way behind. 105 looks great, but right now, Burke County, that is the busiest place in town.
That's why they're looking to do the widening and new
And
bridge.
when they start
and all
widening that, of course, people will seek other areas to stay out of all the traffic. But eventually, that side of the street is going to look a lot different than the other side of the street. If everybody else who goes and rebuilds in there, if you get new restaurants and this kind of thing, they're going to be complying with the other.
Yeah, the other side will have to comply with the ordinance.
So whatever we do here is a precedent, not only for this, but the other piece of property they have, which is going to be open. I think it's beautiful like it is. I mean, the only thing I don't like is all those telephone poles. Why can't we go underground and get Duke Power?
We would agree.
DOT gets that one done, yeah.
But,
Pipe train.
we're faced with whatever we do there, somebody else is going to come in and, well, you did it over there, why can't we do it? That's where we are in a lot of these things. And so when you get there, looking at the future, we need to,
But they do have a pastoral background. That's always been, when you come in, the wide expanse of the pastoral areas is, I think the clustering is a good idea myself.
Okay. Thank you. And please take your seats then.
If I may follow up, because I'd like to hear from Tom as well.
Well, Judy's over here biting at the bit to make comments, so just a second.
Did you want me? I'm sorry.
Just a second, Tom. Have a seat.
I think that when you're a public agency, you have responsibilities. And one of those responsibilities is that you comply with the rules and regulations. If public agencies can't do it, then we really can't expect private entities to do it. And part of what we have to do as this body is deal with private entities that come to us all the time and ask us to bend the rules for them. And I'm really concerned when public entities come to us and ask us to do that. And I am very familiar with your campus. It's gorgeous. And I understand the pastoral nature. But I quite frankly think it's ridiculous that you think adding 150 shrubs is going to ruin the pastoral nature of your campus. It's not. Whether you scatter them or line them up, that is a massive campus. Nobody is going to notice how 150 shrubs are arranged on a campus that size. Whether you line them up or cluster them however you want. I understand the maintenance issues that you're confronting, and yes, that's an issue. But that was going to be an issue when you took on this project, and it should have been put in your budget. Just like maintenance on any other new building that you were going to add to your campus. That's part of project management. And why that's all of a sudden something you're confronting, I mean, I don't know why that's coming up now at this point in your project. And then the last thing I would say that is disturbing to me, and you said this and it's bothering me, minimizing the cost of public buildings. Well, we can't do it because it's adding to the cost. Well, I don't want any, public capital projects to be frivolous. But, was a time when public places were the most valuable places, where we all treasured, that we were all proud of. And taking something out to make it less valuable or less beautiful is not the right thing to do. I'm just putting that out there.
Okay, thank you. Bill, you had something else?
I've got a couple of questions of Tom, but I, just in point of clarification for what I'm saying, transparency, if you will. I've been on this committee for quite a number of years now, and you have even graced me with the opportunity to be vice chair for several years, which I'm not now. Thank you. On that line. But I also am a trustee of Western Piedmont Community College and have been involved with the college for about 18 years now. And I would go back to what was said earlier, is that the college will, regardless of the outcomes and decisions here, continue to be a strong partner for the city of Morganton and for Burke County. As Ms. Holman has mentioned, there are a number of projects underway already that the college itself is looking very forward to, and working with a number of different parties as well. That said, I think we need to have this very serious discussion because it is a precedent situation, perhaps, and that needs to be voted up or down. Go on record as we have to, pro or con to this particular application. I've also served on the Community Appearance Committee of the city for quite a number of years. So I am a green person, and when it comes to landscape, and I cut my own grass and all those kinds of things, even though I'm 75 years old. And I appreciate always the viewpoints that Judy has, because she has been there and done that in planning in so many different capacities, as well as a number of people here on the board elsewhere, and certainly Wade in his role. What I'd like to ask specifically, though, of Tom, and I'd come back to something perhaps later, is can you tell us, and there was one other slide back in there, I don't know whether we can get to it or not. We don't have a topographical rendering here, but it seemed to me that at the level of the Highway 64,
Chad, can you pull that up?
and then where this is rising somewhat, the topography of the yard, if you will, rises to a certain number of feet. And can you also tell us about how far off of the highway actually the building is, and realizing that distance is maintained green space currently?
Yeah, the building sits about 175 feet to 190 feet, somewhere in there, off the corner. So the corridor overlay, the line of that corridor overlay that you saw in that plan, that has a small portion of the building in the corridor overlay, is 250 feet from the center line of the road. So it's minus whatever that center line, whatever half the road is, plus the right-of-way, and then the distance to,
Okay. And how about the rise of the elevation here?
Oh, the rise of the elevation, there's probably from that point that you're sitting in a car to the elevation of the Jeff, it's about a 7-foot difference, I think, maybe about a 7-foot difference from the road up to finished floor elevation of the building.
Yeah, it probably transitions from the corner.
Yeah.
The car one is coming up the road, and it's obviously a little more dramatic there. And there's a point where you're level with the building, and then it's below once you get closer to the
And the backside, of course, at the backside of the building, things drop off drastically with the hill there, yeah.
Anybody else have a question for him before he sits down?
I have several questions. Thank you for your presentation. It was really interesting, and I'm excited for this development and appreciate the community college very much. I certainly can understand that, all these shrubs take a lot of maintenance and they cost a lot. I'm curious as to why the alternative then was not just to remove the shrubs from that tree line as opposed to like totally removing the trees. It sounds like the trees are something you're happy to do, but the cluster is just such a dramatic departure from the design. I'm sort of wondering what was driving that choice.
Yeah, that goes back to when we got the original comment back in February with staff at that time. We asked them questions about it. We presented just some thoughts on how we might move forward and what the concern was. And that was just in conjunction with suggestions from them as well. So is that even without the shrubs, that planting those trees along that line just, would be out of context with those kind of rolling hills and the bosques and stuff at the time. And we certainly appreciate, Wade's point of view and about the number of, plantings and intent. Jeff and myself have been doing this for over 30 years, and, we just have a different opinion, though, when it comes to just, what still might meet that intent. But we certainly understand precedents. We also think that in the precedents that it is a different, when you look at the examples in the ordinance as far as what a street yard applies to, that it is quite different.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it feels like the space between that part of the road and that building is not quite pastoral yet, to the point of having it, coming up a hill, and it's not that significant of like, I mean, it's significant, but it's not as grand as when you go past that road, and then it is a very striking pastoral view, to your point. Yeah, I'm just curious is there some room for negotiation to like not what's been presented, but something in between, or I'm not quite sure how that process works. I don't know if you could speak to that, Wade.
Well, essentially what staff had proposed to them in a meeting, I guess it was a couple weeks ago now, was that they cluster the trees and shrubs with the numbers that are required, largely in the same sort of clustering pattern they have, but do so in a way that, they are meeting at least part of the requirements of the ordinance, i.e. the numbers of plantings.
In terms of numbers, I see. I mean, it certainly is.
Clustering is not an
yeah.
issue at all.
Yeah. And I don't know that it looks aesthetically bad. I think, to Judy's point, it certainly is not in touch at all with the corridor overlay sort of zoning here, which if that's why it was intended, to sort of have some like mark that we're looking to achieve, having nothing along the corridor.
Well, having not been here in February, I can't speak to the exact
of
reasoning, but I would have to assume that the power lines running along that street also had something to do with not wanting to have the trees right there too.
I mean, to me, the trees would help like diminish the like jarring nature of the. It's like trees sort of hide a bit the power lines, but that's perhaps
The
just
power company wouldn't like it.
That's their problem. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, there's nothing that we need more here in Morganton than that school, that's for sure. That's going to be a wonderful thing for us because it's needed. It's needed all over the nation, I guess, not just here. We need people that can perform the tasks that they're going to be teaching, and plenty of them. I hope there's some way that, it may take some future negotiation, but I hope there's some way that we can work this out. It is late in the season to be discussing this. Maybe we'd have looked at that a little sooner, been more aware than we could have taken care of something. But it's got to happen. We got to make this school work.
Yeah, and I mean, in addressing your question about negotiation in between, I mean, maybe not today,
Sure,
because we don't design on the fly, but we have an approved plan. We have to build the approved plan in order to get a TCO. We're not, So in order to modify the plan, we have to go back to staff and sit down and do exactly what we did 2 weeks ago. So we have no choice but to go and come to some agreement in order to actually decide. Even if we go with this concept, we still have to decide on what type, what location, what number of plants will go in the modified plan that would be planted in order to get a CO.
If you don't want to dig all this up in the future, plant it a little further back towards the building.
Yeah.
Because I got a feeling one day that whole area is gonna really be a mess.
Yeah, and Jeff could probably, he's a civil engineer. I mean, he could probably speak more to that because he was involved in a lot of those discussions with DOT and stuff. And it really, that just, at some point, just all those talks about it being delayed, we had to put on the shelf, you know, so that we could move forward, yeah.
Well, I want to know if there's any more public comments. When we're getting into discussion without, Jeff, you're going to speak, so, okay.
Anyone else
Just
have,
here, just for good looks alone?
Yeah.
anybody else have a question
You're
for
doing your
Tom
job.
or Sandy? Hearing none, I'm going to close the public portion.
May I speak as city attorney?
You can, please.
Not technically public comment, but
Semi-public.
as city attorney, I need to say two things about the process that you're in here. Although before I say that, I feel compelled to point out, and y'all have sort of hinted at this, what the college is requesting is not, in alternative design, is not a modification in some fashion of the street yard requirement. They are requesting that we relieve them of any street yard requirement because their alternative design doesn't provide for anything within the strip of land along the right-of-way of the street. Just wanted to say that. I'm not saying they can't do that. I'm just saying, please understand that. Having said that, the process that you're facing, or what you're doing here, according to our ordinance, your job is to review the proposal, the alternative design proposal, and recommend one of three things: approval, denial, or approval with conditions. And that's not further defined in the ordinance. So candidly, if that's what you choose to do, you could set, as long as it's, you know, within reason, you could set conditions and make an approval in that manner, if that's what you choose to do. I just wanted to be sure to point that out before you vote.
Technical question for you, sir. If we're doing approval with conditions, does the applicant need to accept the conditions to move forward?
Oh, well, I would assume so, yeah. Either way, I mean, obviously, if they don't agree with the result, they have the right to take this to the city council. in any
Regardless,
event.
okay.
As does the city, of course, if we disagree
Okay.
with the result. Well, it'd have to go, if it was to be an approval, it has to go to the council anyway for final approval.
Thank you,
Just
sir.
wanted to make that clear.
It's part of your thing.
Okay.
Thank you.
Now we'll bring it back to the commission for further discussion, questions, comments.
Is the key word here intent on meeting the, you know, it's a subjective thing, I think, when you're talking about landscaping, I mean, and is the question a matter of intent, subjective, is it subjective, or is there quantitative numbers involved in meeting the requirements?
Wade, do you want to answer that?
It would be my interpretation, and the attorney is free to add on to this, but my interpretation would be it would allow you an exception from certain portions, but not all elements of any given section of the ordinance.
Can you trade one portion for another? Can you trade trees for shrubs?
We have nothing set up distinctively within the ordinance to allow for that at the moment. We do have things in the ordinance that would allow large trees for small trees, but nothing that would spell out
But
small shrubs to trees, et cetera.
if they proposed that, you say in a future thing, and then we accepted that as an alternative, then you could accept an alternative like that.
As a ratio of, could we propose that as a
whatever-
condition, is a ratio of shrubs for trees, as a condition? Is that feasible? To be determined at a later date what the ratio would be?
I mean, then we're becoming landscape
leave that to greater
architects,
minds
yeah,
than
and it
my
feels
own.
like we're
Yeah.
not really equipped to do that.
If I may, I think as I understand the alternative design review process, hypothetically, if a property owner comes before us and says, instead of putting, 50 large shrubs and 30 small shrubs, I want to put 30 large shrubs and 50 small shrubs, or something like that, I think, and if you determine that that is creative and all that, I think you can do that. I don't know, yeah, I think that's a fair point. I don't know if you want to get into being landscape architects, but the proposal before you is what's been described.
I don't think
And
we
of
need
course,
to
doesn't involve any shrubs.
make an alternative. I think we need to either accept or deny.
Yep.
If they want to come back, let them come back.
Yes, I agree with that.
I agree.
Let me just ask one question. Your biggest concern is the mulch planting bed along Highway 64? Is that one of your main concerns?
He already told them they didn't need to do that.
Well, that was been approved as far as.
I guess, I'm gonna let Sandy speak to that because really costs and maintenance stuff that's not our, so. Well, that's our concern. It's really their burden.
Yes. The shrubs is the main concern. The trees, we've got existing trees there, and we were planting more trees than what the ordinance was going to require. So the trees are not in question, or the number of trees. The shrubs at 155 were in question, and we were looking at ways of adding some shrubs, and then that's when we were informed, I guess a week and a half ago, that the number had to stay the same with the possibility of a 10% reduction, which would have only been like 10 or 15 shrubs. And so again, it kind of went back to just the total number of shrubs and where they fit in. And again, just want to reiterate, we're not saying that doing the shrubs is going to make the campus look bad or, look better. I think that's a personal opinion and a perception. And our perception at this point from the college perception is just that having the trees there brings that, you're still looking kind of eye level and looking towards the campus in the distance and the view. We just feel like the view would be better with that. But again, it's just our perception of that. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to look bad if we have to plant shrubs and trees.
Thank you.
Thank you.
To your knowledge, one more question, please. To your knowledge, is there any plans on the rest of that huge piece of property up near the road that y'all would build anything there?
No, at this point, I can never say never, but at this point, and with historical proposals that's come to our trustees, I would say that there's not really an interest in developing the rest of that land. We chose that spot on that southern portion because it is kind of on the back, or kind of at the bottom of the campus, so you still get views of the campus. But that space between College Drive and basically the new entrance for the School of Science and Math, one, the topography is not the greatest for building anything, but also just that sweeping view as you're at that point of Berkmont is so nice. I don't feel there would be any development from the college.
Well,
on
that's
that
my
land.
question, because that would be next if you decided to build something there, would be,
Yeah,
yeah. I can see Carr Hall from the road.
yes.
Yeah, another reason for the selection of that site had to do with the nature of the building. Because of the drop-off in topography on the backside and the potential for building expansion in the future and the trades being kind of dirty, that site allows us to put the entrance front and center, but put all of those dirty activities down the hill behind all those trees where you couldn't see them. So we struggled with other sites on campus that might have had been further back or different views, but actually, ironically, putting it up front helped us with that one issue. So,
Thank you, Tom.
Okay, now I'll talk.
A little more information I'd like to share. This regards to that whole corridor out there is what DOT may or may not do, and there have been about 5 different plans. I have followed that closely because I am involved with the college, as I mentioned. And just generally, it's something that I'm interested in. But the last thing that came along with it was that the commercial side, if you will, of the road was tried to be maintained as much as possible along that. The cookout was a little bit dangerous as to whether or not it could be fitted into the spacing areas that DOT last came up with.
Chick-fil-A.
Chick-fil-A was okay. As you got farther down to the existing interchange, they basically have come back. The last thing was a modified version of what's already there. They threw out an interchange that they had thought about at one time, and now they're just looking at extending and repositioning ramps more effectively and doing the bridge work itself. And again, that's 5, 6, 10 years out now because of funding issues with the state. But I would think, just me, that whenever that does happen, they will come knocking at Western Piedmont to basically say we need to go over another 2, 3, 4 feet in that direction along that part of it. I tried to do my homework on this because it does, precedent is an issue, and we need to be sure that we're either affirming that or whatever the situation calls for here. But this is an exceptional situation, if there ever is going to be one, because Western Piedmont itself, 300 acres, was carved out of the Great Broughton Hospital Farm area project. And those of you who have followed things locally, that is an 880-acre dream plan with the city and the county to develop that whole process of properties through it. At the same time, trying to do job creation, economic development, all those types of things. We mentioned greenway extensions to the bottom, which is the city's always excited about, and I am too. Great things could be done there. But I looked at it and I said, where else do we have in the city limits of Morganton big tracts like this that would be affected one way or the other, or even comparable? And in some ways, I came back to our own park system, Catawba Meadows Park, Freedom Park, and I went out and drove by those and whatnot. And in one case, Catawba Meadows, they've done some fence work there. But what you don't see is lines of bushes. And I think, and just in my gut feel, is the reason you don't see that is because Park and Rec is stretched like we're talking about here economically, and they don't want to maintain bush lines and have to, cut and do those. And if I can tell you that if we put these in at Western Piedmont, have the school put those in at Western Piedmont will be out there trimming them 2, 3 times a year as necessary to keep them looking right. Some people, some entities might not be quite so vigorous about keeping it pruned that way. But Western Piedmont values the whole look at that campus extremely. And I would just add on to what's already been said, is that the trustees are very protective about this whole streetscape area and what it does certainly for the campus, but also what it does for the entrance to the city through that part. And the reason I asked the question about the topography is if we get a 7-foot rise, a bush line is going to be probably 4 to 6 feet tall. And just in my opinion, that doesn't do a whole lot other than just add cost, that part of it. But certainly I understand the ordinance, I understand the precedent. But I think it's one situation where it is quite so pastoral through that that doing that, that installation right there just does not do anything for me. But we have to vote that up or down in what we're talking about here today. And so whatever it means to each individual board member is appropriate. And you vote that up one way or the other to approve the application or to deny the application. I don't think that we're in a time frame of doing conditional issues personally myself. I think that's something for the board to address in changes to the zoning document itself over a period of time. We knew when we put that back around, I think it was 214, 216, there were things that we would miss and things would come up and we would address those. And we need to do those as they appear to us and as they come forward. We can't be clairvoyant on everything, but we certainly have to understand that the overall ordinance is a good one and that we have to reasonably support it where we can. But personally, I just don't feel that this gains us anything one way or another. And the fact that it is such a highly maintained area itself and the landscape already, and plants and trees to be added, particularly trees to be added, I think it certainly meets an intent in my mind, but that's for us to vote up or down.
Okay. Eric, you've been real quiet tonight.
Yeah, no, I agree that this is not a traditional development. And quite frankly, I may be one on the board that thinks our ordinance is a little strict with landscaping. It's a little overboard in some instances. However, it's funny, this example came to my mind, and this is an educational institution. I'm in grad school now. I cannot go to my professor after my final grades have already been graded and ask for a redo. In this instance, it's kind of similar. You're asking for a redo, and this plan has already been submitted and approved, and we're coming back to it. I would be more than happy to look at another plan, but to me, it does not work out and needs to be denied, and that is just my statement.
Okay. Eric, Rick?
Well, you know, I'm a commercial builder. If we, the next project I do, if we let them get by with it as a commercial institution, I want my next one waived too. I mean, that's just what I'm saying. I mean, I'm sorry, that's just the way I feel. I mean, that's on the corridor coming in. I think I've done that many shrubs, and I think you can do that many shrubs, and on a project that size, you can hide them, and, you know, everybody's got maintenance. I mean, that's just an issue. I mean, I've done a lot of work for Western Piedmont over the years as a contractor, and I know the maintenance guys over there, and they do a good job. And I don't know if you'd have to add an employee to maintain that many shrubs. So that's my feeling on it.
Okay. I'm sitting here torn. We spent 15 months coming up with a very detailed zoning ordinance, of which this portion of our ordinance is intended to do a couple of things. And one is it's to create an incentive for development, which also helps to have impact on density. And that was the whole purpose for a lot of these numbers and why it was put in there. Not to mention to improve the actual cosmetic appeal for Morganton. My other thought is you come in on Highway 18 into Morganton, and you see basically both sides of the street are lined with trees, which are quite lovely in the month of August, coming into Morganton. Right now, if I were to make a motion, I would say that what the staff has done is to back off quite a bit based on your alternative request. And what I would do is I would personally want to stay away from anything lining Highway 64 because of future plans. those trees and stuff could be mature in 15 years, and if we get that new street widened, all that is gone with a chainsaw, is the way I would see it.
DOT replaces it.
And I'm therefore much in favor of doing clusters with the amount of shrubs that could be colorful shrubs or blooming shrubs to add color to the campus. And on that, I will ask if someone has
Give me
a
a comment here.
comment here to go with that or a motion. Pete, speak up.
Yeah. Okay, first of all, yes, Western Piedmont, a huge value to the community, yes. And the campus is beautiful, and you point out very validly that, if you look down on the main buildings, it's surrounded by trees and flower beds, and the pond has the vegetation. We have the great green space. There's a lot of vegetation around everything that's in use. And when we went through the torturous process of coming up with this new regulation, what do you say, 2012, 2014? 15. We looked very hard at the corridor coming into Morganton, and how do we make sure that we don't have any plain buildings, whether it's a corporate building or industrial building or whatever. And what we try to do is say, okay, we want some screening of those buildings. Now, this is a corporate building, a very attractive one, but it's a corporate flat blank wall. It's a brick wall. And so once again, we're talking about the precedent of something coming in. And is it possible to pull up this one slide here?
It's the last slide from his presentation.
Yeah. Can we pull up that last slide?
Chad, can you pull up the last slide of his presentation?
No, go back one more.
Go back one.
That one right there. I walked out, I went over and drove over and walked this quite a bit the other day after I got this huge packet. And, I looked at it and said, what you have done is yes, everything is set back and set back in the trees, and all of a sudden we've moved this building right up front. And it doesn't have any trees, and I love your photographer. He did a great job of taking pictures with trees in the front. But in reality, this is what we have. We have several hundred feet of pure frontage where the clusters are on either side of it, and this building is front and center with no blockage, no softening to it. So I guess my question, and I don't like, frankly, I looked at the linear design and thought that was the ugliest thing I ever saw in my life. A straight linear row. And so I guess with other people, in my ideas of landscape design, I see amoebas and free-form shapes and stuff like that. What I would encourage is to come back with a series of amoebas in that area there that had large trees, small trees, and, shrubs or not shrubs, I don't care. But the idea from the corridor design was to give some blockage and not have an exposed building that way. And I am totally for variations and exceptions. I'm not a numbers guy. I try to break every rule I can find. So, if he suddenly said, okay, I don't have this, but in front of the building to soften it to meet the intent of the new zoning thing we came up with, we have softened it this way with this series of things. But I think the straight several hundred feet that we have there from that one planning you have back by Enterprise all the way to College Drive, which is just basically a straight line shot of pure openness, does not meet the intent of the corridor district and sets a bad precedent. So I would love for you to come back with something that says, hey, here we are. We came up with a maintenance-free thing. All of our amoebas have space for a tractor whip around there 2 or 3 times and keep on trucking it 20 miles an hour. Great. You know, I don't want this narrow thing, but I would appeal to you to come back and say, wow, here's the intent of the corridor district, and here's how we could do it to, you know, meet the intent, if not the numbers, and then soften the design and literally give some kind of vestige.
Okay,
How's that for a word?
You want to make that in the form of a motion, Pete?
Okay. You do this for you all the time. I recommend that we do not accept the variance has been requested, and we do request that the college and their architects come back with a modification that meets the intent. And I would throw in something, since everyone's talking about widening the street. I don't see, since you got 150, 190 feet to play with, move that sucker back so we don't have to dig it up later on. But if, you know, if the trees were not within 10 feet, but you moved them back 10 or 20 yards, what's the harm there? It's not going to get dug up later on if we widen Berkman. But the thing would be to come up, ask you to come back with a alternative design that meets the intent of the corridor district and still meets the needs of Western Piedmont as far as lower costs.
Okay, so your motion is to
Deny.
deny the request.
Deny the request.
Of the alternate design. Do I have a second to that?
I'll second.
I've got a second with Judy. Any further discussion, questions, comments? Call for the vote?
I would like to make one final comment. I think Mr. Lennon's remark about precedent, and you're looking at Catawba Meadows, for example, such a wide expanse there. We're talking about pasture-like land, and that land has, like you say, no bushes, no shrubs there along that line. So if we're going to look at precedent, it seems like that precedent's been set there already. That's been certainly okayed by the city by allowing it to exist that way.
They're not in the corridor district.
Well, it's still within.
It was just pointed out that Catawba Meadows was actually constructed prior to this ordinance.
Well, it's still there.
But
It's still-
understood, but the precedent does not apply in that case.
Anyone else want to make a
Yes,
comment,
but-
please?
Yeah.
It does have a new section to it, though.
Yeah, we're down below Mountain View
Yeah.
School, but
Okay, anyone else want to make comment on our motion?
well, I would suggest that you get off 105 and ride towards town and kind of look at what they've done there. You've got a sidewalk, which I think I've seen here, that goes all along there. It goes down to the rental car place. Is that correct? There's a sidewalk in front of the school. And we have some buildings over on 105 that have been built since then, that they put I don't like the particular trees they picked out for the city because I think they're high maintenance, to be honest about it. I've got a couple in my yard, and every year you got to take an axe to them and take them down to 2 feet, and they'll grow 100 feet if you leave them alone.
Okay, Waits, thank you. Is there anyone else who want to make a comment? If not, a call for the vote. All in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. All that aren't in favor, say aye or raise your hand. We've got two that aren't in favor of the denial. The rest are in favor of the denial. The motion carries. This can be taken to city council at your desires if you want to appeal it. That city council meeting is Monday, I believe, on the 7th of November. And they meet at 5:15. So if you want to appeal, then you can still get your deal. Oh. Okay. Ours at 5:15. Silly me. Okay. Again, I thank you all for your time and patience and what I thought would be cut and dried. It's a fairly complex situation, as you well see, and we'll move on forward from there. Anything else to be discussed tonight? If not, I'll move that this is closed.
Yeah.